Jacob's Well sits in the bed of Cypress Creek in the Texas Hill Country, a few miles northwest of Wimberley in Hays County. It is owned and managed by the county as a natural area, and in the summer months, it functions as what it appears to be, one of the more beautiful swimming spots in central Texas. The water that rises through it comes from the Trinity Aquifer groundwater that has been filtered through limestone for long enough to emerge at a near constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit and a clarity that, in the right light, makes the opening in the creek bed look less like a hole in the ground and more like a window into something. A 12-foot diameter window. Clear water. Warm enough to swim in. Cold enough to be refreshing in a Texas summer. The kind of place that appears on lists of things to see in the hill country and that fills with families on summer weekends. From the surface, Jacob's Well descends vertically for approximately 30 feet. This is the part you can see from above the initial shaft, wide enough to swim in, clear enough to look down through. People jump in here from the rocks. Children swim across the opening. Below those 30 feet, the shaft changes. It turns at an angle and continues downward through a series of chambers separated by narrow restrictions. The ceiling drops. The walls close in. The light from the surface, already attenuated by 30 feet of water, becomes irrelevant. The passage continues through limestone that is not uniform, not predictable, and not designed for the presence of human beings in any way. The deepest mapped point in Jacob's Well is 137 feet below the surface. The main passage extends approximately 4,500 feet from the opening. There is a secondary conduit branching from it. What is in those passages, the specific geometry of the chambers, the nature of the restrictions between them, the ways in which the cave has killed the people who entered it, is not something that the surface gives any information about. The water is clear, and the sun is warm, and the opening is 12 feet across, and none of that is relevant once you are below the first bend. The cave system beneath Jacob's Well is organized by the people who have dived and mapped it into 4 chambers. Understanding them is understanding why the body count exists. The first chamber is the wide initial shaft, the 30 feet you can see from the surface. This is where recreational swimmers go. This is where the water is clear and the space is generous, and the surface is close enough that the logic of turning back is always available. The second chamber is deeper, wider in places, and accessible to experienced divers. The water is still relatively clear. The dimensions are still manageable. The third chamber is where the cave begins to change the terms. At approximately 80 feet down, in the third chamber, there is a passage that appears to lead upward. In the dark, with limited visibility, with the specific orientation problems that enclosed underwater spaces create, it looks like a way out. The ceiling rises. The passage opens slightly. A diver following it would, reasonably, believe they were ascending toward the surface. They would be wrong. The passage is a false chimney, a dead end. It goes nowhere. Divers who followed it, in the dark, in air that was running down, believing they had found the exit, at least one diver is confirmed to have died inside it. The fourth chamber is beyond another restriction, a passage that has been described as approximately 15 inches of clearance, about 15 feet long, requiring cave divers to remove their tanks and pull them through separately. Beyond the restriction, the chamber is prone to gravel slides. The gravel that lines the floor of the fourth chamber can shift without warning, burying equipment, trapping limbs, and converting a difficult situation into an impossible one in the time it takes for the geology to settle. At least 12 divers have died in Jacob's Well. Most of them died in the third and fourth chambers. On the evening of September 9, 1979, a group of divers from the Houston area drove up to Jacob's Well with their equipment. 2 of them, Kent Mopin, 20 years old, and Mark Brasher, also 20, a student at San Jacinto College, had talked about going deeper than they had before, past the restriction into the fourth chamber, past the point where multiple people had already died. Kent Mopin was, by the standards of his age and experience, a capable diver. He was an assistant instructor at a Houston dive shop and had dived Jacob's Well before. He knew what the fourth chamber was. He had heard the accounts of the people who had reached it and come back, and the accounts contradictory, vivid, irresistible of what might be beyond it. Some divers said the passage at the back of the fourth chamber led to nothing. Others said it opened into a vast room, a cave diver's discovery, of the kind that people who dive caves talk about for the rest of their lives. Others said it dropped straight into the aquifer itself. None of them knew. That was the problem. That was the point. They descended just after midnight. Joe Moy, a third diver in the group, went down with them. The three of them reached the restriction between the third and fourth chambers. It was what it always was, 15 inches of clearance. The gravel floor, the dark beyond it. Maupin removed his tank, backed into the tight passage, and pulled the tank through behind him. Brashear did the same. Joe Moy watched them go. He banged on his own tank with his knife. He waved his flashlight. He was trying to signal them to stop, to come back, to not do this, to remember what this chamber had already done to other people. Brashear looked back at him from inside the passage for a moment. Then, he was gone. Joe Moy surfaced alone. The people on the surface waited. Maupin and Brashear did not come up. The search effort that followed lasted 3 weeks and cost one of the rescuers more than he had expected to pay. Don Dibble was a local dive shop owner with decades of experience, one of the people who knew Jacob's Well, understood its layout, and had the competence to enter the cave and look for the missing divers. He went in. In the fourth chamber, while searching the floor of the cave for Maupin and Brashear, Dibble became buried past his waist in a gravel slide. The same loose, unstable floor material that had already complicated the search had shifted under him without warning, pinning him from the hips down in the sediment of the cave floor. He was rescued by other divers. He surfaced with a ruptured stomach and approximately $8,000 in medical debt, uninsured because his policy had lapsed. He had been scheduled to meet with his insurance agent the day after the accident. The bodies of Maupin and Brashear were not recovered in those 3 weeks. The search was eventually suspended. One body was flushed out of the cave system in 1981. The other was not recovered until 2001, 22 years after the dive. Following the suspension of the search, an attempt was made to prevent anyone else from entering the fourth chamber. A heavy metal grate was installed, cemented into place, at the entrance to the most dangerous passage. Sometime after the grate was installed, someone removed it. They left a note. The note said, "You can't keep us out." The identities of the people who removed the grate have never been confirmed. They left no names. They left 4 words, and the implication of those 4 words is either a declaration of freedom or a description of a compulsion, depending on where you are standing when you read it. Don Dibble recovered from his injuries and eventually returned to Jacob's Well himself, this time to try once more to seal the passage that had nearly killed him and that had kept Maupin and Brashear for 22 years. He gathered a small group and a dozen 80-pound bags of Portland cement and drove back to Wimberley to seal off the access point. Various attempts have been made over the years to limit, regulate, and control who enters Jacob's Well and how far they go. Today, a special permit from the county is required for any diver to enter the cave. The number of permitted dives is restricted. Only expert cave divers are allowed in. The well still draws people. The note on the grate was not a one-time statement from one person. It is, in some form, the answer that this kind of place has always produced. At least 12 people have died in Jacob's Well between 1964 and the early 2000s. 9 of those deaths occurred between 1964 and 1984, fewer than 2 years per death, on average over a 20-year period. The well is still open to permitted divers. The water is still 68 degrees, still clear, still the same pale blue that makes it look, from the surface, like something entirely other than what it is, 12 feet down and 40 and 80 and 137. The Riesending cave system sits inside the Unnersberg Massif in the Bavarian Alps, on the border between Germany and Austria, near the town of Berchtesgaden. The cave's entrance is at approximately 1,800 meters altitude, accessible only by mountaineering equipment, on a cliff face that a helicopter cannot land near. From the entrance, the cave descends vertically in a series of shafts and pitches before opening into a complex system of passages that has, over years of exploration, been mapped to a depth of more than 1,100 meters. This makes Riesending the deepest cave in Germany. Its name in German means, simply, big thing. It is known in the German and European caving community as technically challenging from the first meters of the descent. Not difficult in the way that some caves are difficult tight or wet or cold in isolated sections. Difficult from the entrance, continuously, through the entire system, vertical shafts requiring rope rigging, narrow passages requiring specific body positions, flooded sections, and the accumulated physical demand of working through all of this at depth, where every meter of progress downward is a meter that has to be recovered on the way out. Johann Westhauser had been exploring Riesending since 2002. He was 52 years old in 2014, a physicist at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and a veteran cave explorer who understood what the cave required and had, over more than a decade of expeditions, contributed to the mapping that had extended knowledge of the system to its current depth. He knew this cave the way experienced cavers know the places they have returned to repeatedly, not with comfort, but with the specific earned familiarity that comes from time spent inside something that gives its information slowly. On June 7, 2014, he descended into Riesending with 2 colleagues. By early morning on June 8th, the team had descended approximately 1,000 meters into the cave. They were deep in the system, in an area of the cave devoted to survey work, mapping the passages that had not yet been fully documented, extending the known extent of the Riesending into sections that no one had measured before. At 1:30 in the morning, a rock fell from the ceiling. It struck Westhauser on the head. Despite the helmet he was wearing, the impact caused brain trauma, a skull fracture, and injury to the brain itself, severe enough to leave him initially semi-conscious and unable to move under his own power. 1,000 meters underground. No radio signal. No cell phone reception. The cave entrance 6.5 kilometers away, along passages that, going up, required every technical skill and piece of equipment the team had brought with them. And one man injured in a way that meant he could not use any of his own skills or equipment to participate in his own survival. His 2 colleagues made the immediate decisions that the situation required. One stayed with Westhauser, monitoring his condition, administering what first aid the team's equipment allowed, managing the supplies they had brought for an exploration rather than a long-term occupation. The other started climbing, from 1,000 meters underground to the entrance of Riesending, in conditions that the cave presented on that June morning, is approximately 10 hours of climbing. 10 hours. In the dark. Alone through the vertical pitches and flooded sections and narrow passages that the team had descended together the day before. With the knowledge of what was 1,000 meters below and the understanding that the only way to do anything about it was to get out first. He reached the surface and raised the alarm. That evening, the same day the alarm was raised, 3 groups of cave rescuers, 11 people in total, entered Riesending to begin making their way toward Westhauser and the teammate who had stayed with him. This was the beginning of an operation that would eventually involve, at its peak, 728 people. The Riesending Cave Rescue became one of the largest cave rescue operations in history. 728 rescuers from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Croatia, and other countries. Not 728 people at the surface. 728 people involved in an operation that required over 200 of them to be inside the cave simultaneously, establishing 5 separate bivouac camps at depth to maintain the supply chain and relay system that a rescue at this scale required. To understand the difficulty, consider the logistics from the inside. Westhauser needed to be brought to the surface on a stretcher. A stretcher carrying an injured person through the passages of Riesending, the same passages that healthy, unencumbered, experienced cavers described as technically challenging from the first meter, had to be navigated through every vertical shaft, every tight passage, every flooded section, the entire 6.5 kilometers between where he lay and the entrance. 2 doctors accompanied Westhauser throughout the entire rescue, not at the surface, not at a camp, but physically present with him at every stage of the movement. Because what was happening to Westhauser's brain at depth, in cold and stress, and without the diagnostic equipment that a trauma hospital would provide, was not knowable without someone who could assess it directly, continuously, and adjust what they were doing based on what they found. For 11 days and 10 hours, Johann Westhauser was underground. For 11 days and 10 hours, doctors monitored his condition at depth. Rescue teams replaced each other at intervals, because the physical exertion of navigating the cave, even for healthy and unencumbered rescuers, could not be sustained indefinitely. The teams who rested at the underground camps did so in a cave system at significant depth, in conditions that were cold and damp and entirely enclosed, sustained by supplies that had to be brought in from outside through the same passages they were using to bring a man out. The same geological indifference that had dropped the rock on Westhauser's head applied equally to the 728 people working to bring him out. On June 19, 2014, at 11:44 in the morning, Johann Westhauser emerged from the Riesending cave. He was transported by helicopter to a trauma hospital. He recovered from his injuries. By 2016, he had returned to exploring caves. The operation became well known to the general public for the large rescue effort, and was called a chapter of Alpine rescue history/site. The entrance to the cave was sealed by police after the rescue to prevent curious visitors. The 1+ ton of equipment and debris left inside during the rescue, food scraps, medical material, plastic packaging, batteries, drilling equipment, took until 2020, 6 years later, to fully remove. The cave ecosystem depends on groundwater that the debris was contaminating, and the cleanup was itself a logistical undertaking that took years to complete.